Good morning. A big theme of this conference is the fact that has been said by many people this morning, that more people live in cities than ever before. And one of the great challenges of our time is how we're going to live in these cities sustainably, connected, and in a resilient way. No matter what brought you to this conference and this summit, I think we can all agree that wrapped in that challenge of how we're going to live in cities are huge environmental, economic, and social challenges that we all face in all of our lines of work and in all of the ways in which we build community. Here are some of those challenges. The first is that there's a widening economic divide between the haves and the have-nots. And we know that that leads to insustainability, and that also ultimately just leads to very, very bad things. We also know that as the haves gain more and more, they're still not happy. And in fact, we know that the inverse is true, that for all the stuff we have, that stuff actually isolates us, makes us feel disempowered, and makes us apathetic and not want to engage with our communities and our cities. And we know that all of this is happening in a bubble of unsustainability. We know that our Earth is paying the price for the way that we live, and ultimately, the way that we live has been dictated by our current economy. This economy centralizes wealth, production, and control in a way that stifles creativity, stifles diversity, and stifles innovation, the very things that we need to be able to meet the challenges that our cities are facing. We were once sold this future that looked so good, and if we could just have our own house and have our own car and have our own stuff and not have to rely on each other, then everything would be great and we could have all of the things of our dreams. But we know in reality, and it was particularly poignant in the last speech, that this system actually has failed us as a people. Every morning when I wake up and I turn on the news and I hear about all of the environmental, social, and economic challenges we're facing, I feel like this little guy, a little overwhelmed by both the challenges that we can see and the ones that we can't even predict yet. And the question in front of us is, what do we do? And for many of us in the community building and the urban planning space, we think about this idea of cities and communities that are resilient. Cities and communities in which people turn to each other, in which people work together to find solutions, and citizens are empowered to engage with their cities in new and interesting ways. I submit to you today that the most resilient communities are communities that share, and that sharing, while starts small, really creates the framework for which we can create solutions and collaborate to meet the rising challenges that we're all facing. When we connect peer-to-peer or person-to-person, something incredible happens. There's a transformation. Maybe I share my power tool or I share my car, but suddenly my relationship to my neighbors, to my community, and to my city are all changed by this simple act. Through an economy with humanity at its center and community at its core, suddenly we have creativity, we have sustainability, and we have people empowered to create a new third way to exist. And it starts small. It's happening in cities all over the world, and like I said, people enter the sharing economy for many different reasons. Some because they have a power tool that's sitting idle most of the time, and they're thinking, well, why can't I use this to share it with somebody else? Maybe you just need a new ride, or you need a way to, a place to stay when you're in a new city. And while it starts small, we found that the ultimate implications of sharing are huge. It creates a ripple effect and a new currency that's built on trust, connection, and community. And it actually facilitates the communities that we've all wanted to live in, one in which we know our neighbors, one in which we feel like we're taken care of and connected, and one in which we feel empowered and that we have a hand and a stake in. And so that's why we started Peers. We had this hunch that this was not just a one-off activity, but this was actually both being built by millions of people around the world, and that it's a movement and an idea that's time has come. Our goal is to grow, protect, and mainstream the sharing economy. Now, people ask all the time, okay, so people are using technology, they're maybe sharing their houses or their cars, but what does this mean ultimately? And is this actually happening all over the world? And so we decided to do a grand experiment. We're a young organization, we are about 3 months old, and in the first month of being founded, we called on our community to host dinners in their homes, in their office spaces, and in their communities, both to meet fellow sharers and also to talk about and vision how they would want their city to be more shareable, and then to start to self-organize. We made this call, we gave people some basic tools, and we said, have fun. We really weren't sure what to expect. On the ladder of engagement, asking people to open up their homes to strangers is pretty high. But we made this call, and within a few hours, we had hundreds of people signed up to host dinners in their homes. In the first week of October, we held dinners in 92 cities and 32 countries, from San Francisco to Sao Paulo, Ann Arbor to Nairobi, Tel Aviv to Bangkok. We had dinners all over the world in which people got together, self-organized, and passionately began to work on ways to make their cities more shareable. And again, the question is, why were people so engaged? Why did people do this high bar action? It's because people want a new way to connect to each other and create new ways of creating meaning. And the sharing economy provides that. And so all of the things that we're working towards in this room, whether it's sustainability, whether it's more livable or walkable cities, whether it's more engaged citizenry, the framework for that are citizens that are connected and they feel like they have meaning and they feel like they can do something in the world. And it makes all of that possible. We found that these people who came together to share dinners were not a specific type. They came from many different walks of life, from many different communities. But again, they shared the possibility of being able to have a hand in their own resilience. I'm going to give you 2 examples of the type of transformation that happens when people start to share. One is when I arrived in Boston, I turned on my smartphone and I opened up my Lyft app. If you are in Boston over the next few days and you see a car with pink mustaches riding around, it is actually something called Lyft, which is a technology-enabled ride-sharing service. A gentleman named Dave picked me up from the airport and took me to my final destination, and we had a great conversation. I love trying out new sharing services because there's an opportunity for me to do a little bit of market research and ask people what their experience with sharing is. Dave proceeded for the next 25 minutes to tell me about how Lyft has changed his life. His exact words is that Lyft has changed my station in life, and nothing in my life has ever enabled me to do that. He said that he and his fellow Lyft drivers go out for dinner, they support each other. One of the Lyft drivers had a flat tire and told the other Lyft drivers in 15 minutes, 3 of them were there to help them out. And he runs his own business, but it's a business that he's super passionate about but doesn't always pay the bills, and he has a family. And so by doing Lyft in his free time, he's actually able to continue doing his business and pursue his passion. And that's something that just never was possible for him before. The other thing that we're finding, in addition to this individual transformation, is that it's a really incredible access point for people to engage with the regulations and the rules that they live within in cities. The amazing thing about the sharing economy is it challenges us to think about why we legislate the way we do, why we've created rules that keep us apart and protect us from each other instead of bringing us together and allowing us to collaborate. Recently, the California Public Utilities Commission decided to take up a new regulatory framework for ride sharing, or technology-enabled ride sharing. And generally, I don't know, again, in the community organizing world, when you ask people to go to a California Public Utilities Commission hearing at 8:30 in the morning, no less, to hear about the possibility of a new technology-enabled ride-sharing framework to be created for the state of California, you don't get halfway through that ask before people's eyes glaze over. But we actually ended up turning out over 200 people who came, who showed up, who shared their stories. And when the CPUC actually voted and decided to create this new regulatory framework, they got a standing ovation. And they said that that's the first time they've ever made a ruling that they got a standing ovation for. And that's because, again, people enter the sharing economy for maybe the economic benefit, but then they both see how it changes their communities and it changes the way that they interact with their cities. And these people not only want to change and protect their ability to share in cities, but they also want to help their cities. And there's a pretty poignant example of this. During Hurricane Sandy, and many people have talked about the fact that cities everywhere are having to deal with the real-life implications of climate change, and the fact that many of us are just waiting for disasters to happen, unfortunately. In the wake of Hurricane Sandy, Airbnb, which is, again, a service in which people can share spaces in their homes on a website, started to get inquiries from their community of people saying, hey, I know my fellow New Yorkers are displaced, but I want to host people in my home. I've got this spare bedroom, I've got a couch, and I don't want to charge them money. I want to offer them spaces for free. And so they got so many inquiries that they created a site explicitly for this purpose. And over 1,400 New Yorkers shared their homes for free with fellow people who were displaced by Sandy. Again, it starts small, it starts with the sharing of things, it starts with the economic benefit, but the real ethos of sharing, of we're all in this together, of we can do more together than we can apart, pervades the sharing economy and really engages people in a way that makes them step up and want to help their cities. At Peers, we really believe that the future are cities that are engaged, cities where people have a hand in their own resilience and work with the people who are planning, making the legislation, and dictating the ways that we live in cities to create a new future. We are a young organization, but we're 150,000 members globally strong within just a few short weeks. I hope you'll join us in this vision. Thank you.